Hello and welcome to the channel Blue Planet People, where we're trying to interview unique people from all walks of life and seeing some insights and inspirations and their stories. Today we have a special guest, David Bowden, a author, poet and musician, and he's actually released an amazing album, Dream Radio, under Space Remains. So we're going to have a good chat with him and see how it's all come about. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so David Bowden, poet, author and musician. How are you today?
Thank you, I'm good, yes. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So this is all very exciting and we thank you for, giving us the opportunity to get a little bit more insights onto what you do and how you've done it.
Thanks, yeah,
great. So briefly, I guess, tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and what first inspired poetry and music.
Well, I was born in the UK, in a place, funnily enough, called Bowdon, B-O-W-D-O-N, very close to my own name. But at 4.5 months, my parents emigrated to Australia, and we grew up in Sydney, in Mossman. And yeah, I went to Mossman High just after the sort of punk era as a teenager, when music was massive amongst us. And so everyone was forming bands. And yeah, I nearly joined my brother's band. They broke up the week I was about to join, which was very disappointing. And so that sort of did establish a pattern for several years where I tried to join various bands and, things didn't quite work out. But the most notable of which was Glide. Yeah, as for poetry, I've been writing that since I was a teenager. So I probably started, because we went to England when I was 14, came back at 15, because my dad's a scientist, and so he gets sabbatical, which meant that we'd, live in Australia for 3.5 years, and then go, in this instance, we always went back to the UK for 6 months. And that particular one, when I was 15, came back. I'm afraid it was that terrible teenage thing where I felt like I didn't fit in when I returned. I had a lot of trouble adapting back. And music and poetry were my big discoveries in that stage. I started reading a lot of books. I completely screwed up my HSC because I just lost interest. Right, it was like a guy who's running a marathon and then is winning the race, and then right at the end decides to sort of stop and take up smoking cigarettes. I became interested in French existential novels and poetry. The sort of Jean-Paul Sartre, Jean Cocteau, the Surrealists were a big influence. And that kind of interfered with my education. I sort of saw the school system as a bit of a conveyor belt. It seemed to be a conveyor belt to what looked to me to be a rather boring future of having, job, mortgage, all those sorts of things. And I'd been infected with the idea of becoming an artist. And that's really how it all started. And music was, as I say, a big thing at my school at that time. And I just embraced it. Got a synthesizer when everyone else was buying cars. Saving up for their first car, I was saving up for my first synthesizer, the Roland JX3P, for those of you who care about gear, and managed to do that I was only earning $30 a week, and somehow I managed to save up $1,500, which I still regard that as the most astonishing feat of
the down payment of
I've never been so good with money since, unfortunately, shall we say.
So look, it's fascinating. Yeah, obviously you were creative from the outset, and you took a love for music and writing. And briefly, just tell us a bit about Space Remains. How did it come about? Yeah,
well, as I said, I auditioned for a bunch of bands in the would have been the early 90s. I went to see if I could join a band, an existing band, as a singer. I saw a couple that were interesting, Glide, the one I mentioned, who went on to be quite successful. But yeah, none of them came to fruition. They all just sort of either, we weren't the right fit. I mean, either I could see that, or they could see that, or they made other choices. And so yeah, I went into the DIY world of the Porter Studio and writing my own songs, and you always want to get something more. So one of my big steps was buying a reel-to-reel 8-track, a Tascam, which is the one that I recorded the Dream Radio album on. Before I put out Dream Radio, I did an EP called Telepath, which was actually released on CD and is still available for sale if anyone wants a copy. Yeah, so that was my start, but it cost a lot of money to put that CD together. I learned an incredible amount. My brother William helped me with the mixing of it, so at home I just had this rudimentary setup, and yeah, basically just recorded all on that, and then he helped me mix the Telepath EP, and then from that point on I grew ambitious. I wanted more, and the big step forward for me was when I acquired a Roland JV1080, which is a wonderful synthesizer, and I still have it to this day.
Okay. What inspired the name Space Remains?
Well, that's very simple.
Yeah.
We were driving through Sydney one day, and I looked up and I saw a real estate sign, and it said Space Remains. And I said, I'll have that one, thanks.
Yeah, wow.
It was that simple.
That's excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought there was a deep. Well, there's probably many meanings to it, but
well,
yeah,
it's
the inspiration came simple.
Yeah, the message was sent to me simply, but the meanings are multiple. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Tell us a bit about the making of the album. How's it been?
Yeah, look, it was an interesting one because my partner and I were living in a flat, and for various reasons we moved into someone else's house, and that wasn't a particularly happy experience. And one of the good things about that time was that the house was very large and I was given a room of my own, and that was really the first time I had a room of my own to do music in, even though it was full of clutter and boxes and things. And that's when the album started, and it was really catalysed by the purchase of the JV1080 and a desire to improve on the Telepath EP. And then we moved to a house in Marrickville, which is where the bulk of the album was recorded. And the good thing about that was, again, I'd had a taste of having my own room, and so one of the stipulations was that I would have a little room of my own, which I've kind of done ever since. I've always had my own little sound lab somewhere, except for the period when I wasn't making music.
Yeah. And why is it coming out now and being released now?
Yes, well, that's a good question. The first answer is money, was because at the time, as I said, the Telepath EP cost something like $3,000 to put out, to manufacture. And, I had a little family that I needed to look after. I couldn't just be splurging money left, right and centre. And so it was kind of disappointing because I definitely felt that the Dream Radio songs, the songs on the album, were a greater step forward. I really felt like I'd taken a creative leap forward, but unfortunately I didn't have the money to do anything about it, and I was kind of set on the DIY approach, and I always knew I'd release those songs. I just didn't know it was going to be 25 years. Yeah. That wasn't the plan, put it that way.
Well, we're very glad.
But I'm glad that I'm able to put them out now. The set up Elated Cat Records, and have been able to see them through, and so finally the world gets to hear them. Yeah,
well, personally, I'm glad it came out, and everyone I've listened to it with has agreed. So we're glad it came out. Yeah. So in terms of impact of you when you were growing up, which artists, I guess, musicians had the most impact on you as you first started experimenting with music?
Sure.
And then which artists, I guess, had an impact on you as an older adult, like creating music still?
Yeah, I mean, how long have you got?
Just look up, just the
if
two.
if the camera were to pan behind you, you would see thousands of records, which kind of sums up my life. I've been a music obsessive since I was a teen, and voracious in my search for, I guess, meaning through sound. I've always had a broad taste. I don't like being limited. So yeah, to start off with, it was really Ultravox, one of the big ones for me. Gary Newman, my brother got into Gary Newman. That was our sort of intro to synthesizer music, but then I got into Ultravox, Visage, and the sort of Neuromantics.
Yep.
Beyond that, then I got into Echo and the Bunnymen, and in the mid-80s I got totally into Hendrix, Beatles, Stones, and Van Morrison, and from then on. And then when I met Chrissy, my partner, she sort of brought me back into the modern era at that point. Started listening to more contemporary music, so Smiths. Well, for the album itself, because this album was recorded in the mid to really late 90s. Because I was thinking, what was I listening to at the time? The biggest one that springs to mind is Massive Attack, Mezzanine. That was a massive influence on me.
Cracker.
But things like The Verve. There was a lot of electronica in the mid 90s. So Aphex Twin was another one that sort of crept in there. I missed one important one out, which is Bill Nelson. So I fully credit Bill Nelson with my love of cut-ups. I as you would know from listening to the music, I do love the odd soundbite where you steal, like a bit of a sentence here, but a few words there, phrases. That's something that I got from Bill Nelson, because he was also an inspiration in respect of setting up his own label and his own home studio and getting off the rock and roll treadmill. That was a massive influence for me.
Okay, David, so you can choose one song of yours to perform in front of a crowd anywhere on earth. Which song and where?
That's a tough one. It's not because I have an embarrassment of riches necessarily, although I'd like to think I did. But yeah, there's. What the other thing I would say?
What about someone else's?
Well, let me just keep going, because this album, Dream Radio, which is the one I'm currently promoting, was not the only one I've got in the tank. I kept recording music for some time after I recorded that one, and I have a couple of albums. There's certainly another one that I'm planning to put out in the not too distant future. And it would probably be one of those, but I don't want to promote my album ahead. So if it were to be which of these songs I would perform, look, it has to be Stars. I think Stars is the catchiest of the songs. It's also the first one that I wrote purely on guitar. Because my sort of early way of doing things was building things up. So you'd sort of like put a drum pattern down, maybe get a bass line, get something looping, and then the song would sort of gradually evolve, and then it was almost like sounds that you would then turn into a song. Whereas with Stars, I made the conscious decision to sit down with my guitar, my trusty red Fender Bullet, and write a song on guitar, because I'd never actually done that before. And it was, I think it was a successful.
I can't imagine how ambition could overcome your sense of shame, to climb some slimy ladder into some sleazy hall of fame. But I guess it's just perspective. Forgive me if I pry, or call someone a fool who takes the guts to fall the sky. But it threatened to tear me apart. It threatened to pluck all the stars from the sky in my heart.
Okay, so where would you play it?
Oh, where would I play it?
In which location?
Oh dear. Oh, Stonehenge.
I love it. Okay, so Dave, you're on a trip to Mars with Elon Musk. You can only take one record and a record player. what's it going to be?
Rock and Roll Animal, Lou Reed, the greatest live album ever recorded, in my opinion. I mean, it's all the Velvet Underground hits, but done with a kick-ass rock and roll band. Lou at his best. Yeah, it's just an invigorating record. Great songs.
That's the one, eh? That's the one.
That's the one for today.
And Elon's got to just deal with it. He'll be happy with that, I reckon.
He won't have any choice. I'll have to listen to his record.
Yeah, true. Wonder what he brings. What's some good advice you can give young up-and-coming music artists today?
Get into modelling. No, seriously. I would say, yeah, look, it's a tough business. There are a lot of pitfalls, a lot of things that can lead to disheartenment and feeling like worthlessness. There's not a lot of support in the music business, so you have to really learn to look after yourself, both physically and mentally. Don't be too hard on yourself, but stay true. You know, don't swallow the bullshit. There's a lot of hype, a lot of emphasis on marketing and looks and you know, fitting in with other people and trends. Don't get too caught up in that. At the end of the day, all of those trends are manufactured things that other people lay on top of the industry. The artists with longevity, I mean, if you want to be one of those, look at how they've done things, you know, like the Bob Dylans, Bowie, Neil Young, those guys, how have they stayed relevant over the years? And it usually involves some sort of balance between continuity and being true to themselves, but at the same time reinvention and rethinking how they can not get too repetitive in the releasing things. Like everything needs to feel new. Do it on the cheap. Don't spend money that you're going to have to pay someone back. Like, pay attention to the contracts. If there are contracts, my advice is be as true to yourself as you possibly can be, and believe that what you're doing is worthwhile and that someone at some point in time will come and listen.
What's next? What's next for David Bowden? What's next for Space Remains, or a project that we can look forward to?
So I've started up Elated Cat Records.
Okay. Elated Cat.
Elated Cat.
I like it.
Yeah. It's funny because
You've got cats, right?
Yes, I have 3 cats. I stayed up one night. I was thinking, what am I going to call this label? And I've got the paper here somewhere, and it's got a list of about 60 things. I don't know. I didn't count them, but I was just writing, madly trying to free associate ideas for what I'd call the label. And the funny thing is, it's like, and then I get the last one's Elated Cat. And I knew as soon as I wrote those words, that was it. There's nothing else after it.
Okay.
As soon as I got there, boom, you're the one. But yeah, it took a while to get there. So the plan is to release this album and promote the album, the Dream Radio, Space Remains, which...
Show us that one. That's a beautiful image.
Kids, do yourself a favour, in the words of the great Molly Meldrum.
Oh, the 8-track on the back there?
Sorry, what's that?
Oh
yes, this is the 8-track that I recorded the album on, the Tascam. Wonderful machine. I used to synchronize. I was running Cubase, for those of you who are interested in these things. I was running a very early version of Cubase, not entirely legal, but we won't go there. Don't come after me, Steinberg. And running it through a sync box. So one of the 8 tracks was taken up purely as a sync track. It was like just electrical pulses, so that I could run the computer in time with the 8 track.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really 8 tracks; it was 7. Anyway, so yes, so there's more coming. So there's a back catalogue. There's another album that will come out shortly. Shortly, it won't be 25 years, everybody.
No,
kids, sorry.
You're in the groove.
But yeah, the other thing is I'm planning on putting out a series of compilations. So that's what Elated Cat is going to be about, is introducing new artists. And there's a bit of cross-promotion for Space Remains, and I've got a few other identities, like Laboratory Oceans is going to be the ambient project that I'm working on.
Wow.
Less to Think Of is my sort of more prankster mode.
So you were saying before about collaborating and stuff like that. So if there was a genre or someone was watching this or found your creative material through the different channels, what sort of genre would you like reaching out to you?
Experimental electronica, post-punk, quirky, whatever. It's kind of hard to nail it down to one or two, but it just has to be interesting. And I like eccentrics. I've always, kind of like gelled with eccentrics, but not too eccentric.
Okay.
I like people that can actually manage themselves to some degree. But I like, oddballs I've always got along with, so, I know how to work with them. They just have to be doing interesting stuff.
Yeah, and how would they reach out to you?
Bandcamp, YouTube, Discogs, all of them, which you can find either Space Remains or Elated Cat Records.
Yep.
You should be able to find me one way or the other and figure out a way to get in touch.
And we'll leave links in the video somewhere.
Yes,
probably
thank
as
you.
well.
Great, that'd be wonderful.
Well, thanks, David. It's been, fascinating and an awesome experience to meet you and get a little bit of an insight into what you do and how you've done it. And we appreciate you and your time. We wish you the best in the future, and hopefully we can come back and interview you again on the next lot of creations.
Great, yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you very much. And everybody?
Yep, there's the album. Get it now. Yeah, beautiful. Awesome, mate.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.